Blade Runner 2049, 2017 film made by Denis Villeneuve, starring Ryan Gosling and Harrison Ford. Now, this was an extremely risky film experiment, a sequel made 35 years after the original film came out, and not just any film, but an absolute classic. And the interesting thing about that, though, is that the original Blade Runner was not instantly recognized as a masterpiece. It was released in 1982 based on the book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, and it made almost no money at all. Worse still, critics thought that it was a weak film. They didn't appreciate it for what it was, complaining about the dreary atmosphere and the meandering story. However, as years went by, it became apparent that Blade Runner would be celebrated as classic film for decades to come. It has been perhaps the biggest influence ever on other works of cyberpunk and dystopian sci-fi, visually speaking. The world presented in Blade Runner, world after an ecological disaster, barren canyons of streets between the cold, blocky skyscrapers, the neon lights of logos of corporations that are now running the world, the ever prevalent fog and air pollution, and overall this dense atmosphere of a dying world. It was just one of those movies that you submerge in, you experience more than just watch. The story itself was also quite thought provoking, asking existential questions of what it means to be human and not really offering any easy answers for the audience. Although, admittedly, because of how slow the pacing of the film was and the filmmakers being more concerned with the vibe than the actual plot, Blade Runner remains to this day a very difficult film to watch, especially for first time viewers and people who are not that into cinema and how movies are made. It doesn't necessarily rush the story, quite the opposite. There are many long scenes where nothing happens, and you're supposed to just embrace this world that you're in instead of chasing the story. All in all, though, Blade Runner has reached the status of a masterpiece over the years, and many critics have went by and re-examined it and confirmed that they were wrong on first views. And it's been a massively influential work of art for other filmmakers and video game makers and comic book writers and so on. So when I first heard that there was talk about making a sequel, I was pissed off. I thought that this was a completely unnecessary cash grab, that it would retroactively ruin the previous film, and that it had no possibility of working whatsoever. Then I heard that Denis Villeneuve was the director, and as he was coming off of a streak of fantastic movies, the last one being Arrival, also a cerebral sci fi film which blew me away, I was like, okay, maybe he has a chance. And then the movie came out in 2017, and I went to see it on an IMAX screen. And holy fuck, what an experience it was. Once again, the first thing that stands out is the visual side. This is one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. You could literally take every other scene from it and frame it on the wall as a painting or a poster. It has so many moments which just sink into your memory. The opening sequence with Kay, the protagonist, flying over the protein farms, all in whites and grays, the night landscape of Los Angeles in the rain, the dusty golden mist of abandoned Las Vegas, the massive, colorful, holographic advertisements of the city. The film is just teeming with these shots, and seriously, the bigger the screen you see it on, the better. The person responsible for cinematography was Roger Deakins, one of the most celebrated and accomplished cinematographers currently working. And for Blade Runner 2049, he finally got his Oscar after almost 3 decades of work and 13 previous nominations. Then it's even more impressive when you learn how much of it was done without relying on CGI, but instead practical effects. The opening shots of protein farms in rural California are basically color graded aerial shots of areas in Mexico. The towering skyscrapers in LA were built as models, and the camera basically moved between them. And because of the correct angles and attention to detail, it really looks like a real city. Even my favorite shot of the entire film, with Kay watching a huge holographic advertisement of joy, was done practically by spraying a lot of some kind of mixture of smoke and mist. and projecting a huge image over that using lights. It's almost unbelievable how you could create something like this in the real world without the use of computers. Then there's the story aspect, which I think was actually done much, much better than in the previous film. So we're once again in this world after an ecologic crisis. The poor live on the dying earth, and the rich on off-world colonies. Those colonies are being built on the backs of essentially slaves, replicants, robots built to resemble humans, although they are much stronger and more resilient for the manual labor that they are designed to do. And of course, they are designed to be obedient as well. But some of the older models would occasionally glitch and rebel and basically go rogue, sometimes escaping to Earth. And our protagonist, Kay, is a Blade Runner, a special type of policeman tasked with tracking down and killing those illegal replicants. Kay, however, is also himself a replicant. And then, on an assignment at the beginning of the film, he finds unexpected clues that suggest that around 30 years ago, around the time of the previous film, a female replicant gave birth to a child, something that was considered completely impossible. And Kay is tasked with finding the child and killing it as well, to remove the chance of this information getting out and potentially sparking a war between humans and replicants. So once again, we are tangled in this philosophical debate. What defines a human being? What does it mean to be human? Is it a set of predetermined conditions, or can you, despite who you are physically, aspire to be something more morally? And once again, there are no easy answers, which I love. The film also heavily borrows not just from the previous movie, but from the works of Franz Kafka, which is evidenced even just by naming the protagonist Kay, and also placing him in some similar situations and moral conundrums. The main difference between Blade Runner and 2049 is that this time around, while the atmosphere and general vibe are still heavily accentuated and present, the story is way more engaging. The plot moves forward in a way that really grips you from start to finish and makes you wonder how it's gonna end. It's quite incredible too how well paced the story is. I heard someone describe it once as one of the shortest 3-hour movies ever, because the runtime is almost 3 hours. It's about 2 hours 40 minutes, but it just breezes through. You don't feel the time pass by. The world building aspect is also not treated any worse than in the original. Apart from the locations, we have a lot of those background characters that appear for a scene or two and are never to be seen again. And you can see that there is more about them, more to them, that they have some kind of background, that they lead their own lives and have their own agendas. It never feels like a world that is built around the story as an accessory, but it feels like the story that happens to take place in a fully realized, fully functioning world that doesn't always necessarily care about our protagonist and his quest. The protagonist is just one of many people pursuing his own case. I also wanted to talk about music. The score from the original, made by Vangelis, is iconic, and it was interesting to me whether Hans Zimmer would try to copy it in any way or just do something new. Unfortunately, the answer is no. He does it in his own way, although you can hear the inspirations as well, and the respect that he gives to the original Vangelis tracks. And the music written for 2049 is just glorious. It really enhances the experience. It helps make you feel like you're there always with the protagonists, and I think it fits the world presented so well, regardless of the location that we're in. There is one track that is basically stolen from the original. It's called Tears in the Rain, but taking into account the context of that track in the original film and in this one and the scene in which it appears, it makes perfect sense that it's here. So, as I said in the beginning, Blade Runner 2049 was certainly a risky experiment, but it paid off in a huge way. Not financially, the movie was pretty much a bomb, unsurprisingly. People don't seem to like cerebral sci-fi and would rather throw their money at the latest Marvel movie or Fast and Furious franchise. But I personally consider it, and many critics do, consider this to be the better film of the two, and it is certainly one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's just this rare blend of everything being done perfectly and coming together to create this unforgettable experience. The cinematography, the story, the acting, the music, just brilliant, spectacular piece of cinema. It also makes me all the more excited for the next project from Denis Villeneuve, the adaptation of Dune that is supposed to come out next year. It's one of the most the original book is one of the most important science fiction novels of all time. And knowing the book quite well, I'd say it's about impossible to do it right. But after 2049, after another case of something being impossible and going so right, I think if there's anybody I trust with it, it's Villeneuve.